Welcome to Chronicles of Old Singapore. This is Dr Loh KS, the people's historian, and I speak to people about their memories of Singapore before it became a global city. Do like the video and subscribe for future episodes. This will help us a lot. I'm very happy to have with me on the podcast today my good friend Darinee Alagirisamy. Darinee, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Kasing.
The podcast is usually focused on memories, as I said just now, but today is going to be doing a lot of research as well. In fact, I think among some of my interviewees who have, especially those who have written about their topics, their heritage, they have always done some research, right, on their heritage. So in previous episodes, Meja Singh had come on and talk about the history of the Sikhs. Dilip Doshi on the Gujaratis, which is very interesting. The traders, and just a new episode had come out on the Malayalis by Ulas Kumar. Right, so all of them had talked about their memories, but also drawn upon their research on various groups of Indians, right? So really, I've been trying to capture and document all the Indian subgroups or South Asian subgroups in the podcast. So I've done the Sikhs, Gujaratis, and Malayalis. And hopefully after today, I will be able to do the Ceylonese as well. Chalva recommended me someone who seems like a good source for the material. So today we are going to look at the biggest group among the South Asians in Singapore, the Tamils, who have a very long history going back to the early 19th century. And Darinee is going to take us through the history of the Tamils, what may constitute their heritage today, right, in Singapore, and what the community can look forward to in the future to come. So, Darinee, maybe I can ask you to say a bit more about your research and your teaching of the history of the Tamils.
Sure, Kasing. I'll be
Mm-hmm.
happy to talk about my ongoing research. So I see my research as having two aspects to it. The first is focused on modern Indian history, and here I've mainly been interested in state forms, the formation of the modern Indian state, through the policies that have survived from the colonial to and through the post-colonial period. So here I've been mainly interested in how various segments of society, diverse segments of society, have responded to the authorities, to governments, and how those interactions have produced policy measures. The second aspect of my research, which is quite closely related to the first, is how the diaspora, the Indian diaspora, Southeast Asia, has responded to these policy stances in the countries that they have settled in. And what connects both of these aspects of my research is a focus on social reform, how the pursuit of reform was really at the forefront, was really at the focus point of many of the policy measures that were experimented with in the late 19th, early to mid 20th centuries, and that formed the basis of what was to come post independence.
Interesting. And what is it you teach?
So I teach a range of modules. I teach modules on Tamil history, Tamil culture,
Mm.
contemporary Tamil literature. So that's from the Tamil studies aspects of my course offerings. But I also teach Bollywood cinema and its linkages to Indian politics, society, and culture. I teach food culture and society in South Asian societies as well.
Are there other causes on like the other Indian groups, or is the Tamils the main cause? Are there causes on the Sikhs or the other groups?
Yes, so we have
Mm.
a Sikh studies chair, and as part of that program, we have courses that engage with Sikh society and politics around the world. We have an introduction to Sikhism course, but we don't have any undergraduate course or master's course for that matter, which is
Oh.
focused on a particular community like the Tamil studies or the Sikh studies programs are.
So,
So
just to clarify, you mean there are no undergraduate courses for the other Indian groups? Is that right?
no, they aren't. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, okay. So what is the basis for having a course on the Tamils? Is it because they are the largest group of the Indian population in Singapore?
Sure. And this is very much a reflection of the official recognition, that's given to Tamil, that Tamil enjoys as the, language, Indian language in Singapore.
Mm,
So it is in recognition of its status as the language accruing to the largest ethnic group within the Indian subgrouping.
And possibly there are is not just the Tamils, right? The history of the Tamils, culture of Tamils does have some resonance with some of the other Indian groups as well. Who, I mean, I know some of the other groups they may study Tamil.
Mhm.
The Malayalis do study Tamil, some of them, and I don't know, maybe the culture overlaps as well. Is that right
Yes,
to say?
absolutely.
Mm,
Absolutely. I think the convergences present, even if we were to look at languages and the kind of similarities that present between Tamil and the other sort of Dravidian
mm,
languages, the languages that are within the Dravidian family of languages, languages like Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada.
mm,
So these languages share a great deal of shared history, whether we think in terms of linguistic ties, whether we think in terms of geography and the kind of uh,
mm,
issues that have presented as a result of their shared history in India, given the proximity of all of these constituent states.
What is the title of your module? The Tamil history module.
Sure. So the two Tamil studies modules, one of them is Tamil culture and society, that is offered at a level 3000 level of student
Uh,
engagement. And the other one is contemporary Tamil literature, which is offered at level 2000. Oh, yes. So I left out the sexy aspects of these courses. So the
yeah.
contemporary Tamil literature or contemporary, yes, Tamil literature is actually wicked words. And that module
Okay.
focuses on controversy and what underpins controversy, how is controversy constructed, received in contemporary Tamil literature forms the focus of that module.
You mean controversy in the stories?
Well, a lot of it depends on the responses to these works as well by
Yeah.
society, isn't it? So
Okay.
we look really at why is it that some words, some works of fiction become as controversial, as scandalous as they do?
Mm.
Why do they not sit well with society? What are those touch points that become,
Mm.
especially touchy?
Yeah, very interesting, right? So let's go to the history of the Tamils and culture. When you try to teach the course, tell us about what kind of students you are dealing with and what is it that you try to bring across most of all, right, to these students.
Sure. So the courses that I have on offer are not just focused on Tamil society or settlement in Singapore.
Yeah.
They look at Tamil culture on a global scale. So they begin with Tamil Nadu, they begin with politics, history, society in Tamil Nadu, and they branch out from there to look at how diasporic communities came to be, what are the points of similarity, uh, how do these communities engage with Tamilness? Is there even a universal sort of Tamil essence that we can discern,
Mm. Mm.
that we can talk about in terms of Tamil identity? Is that even meaningful? Um, so that is one broad focus that both of these courses share. In terms of student profile, I would say that because we offer both of these courses as bilingual courses in English and Tamil, they are accessible to students who are interested in the Tamil region, Tamil worlds of belonging. But by and large, the students who take our modules tend to be students who are Tamil speakers themselves. They are usually second, third generation Tamils,
Mm.
and they are passionate about their identity and they want to learn more about it.
Yeah, this is a level 3000 course, right? So it's for majors, lah, probably, or even
It is intended
honors,
for me with,
right?
yes.
Okay. I find it quite interesting that you kind of situate the course not just, in the case of the local Tamils, but also the larger Tamil context, right? Beginning with Tamil Nadu. So I don't know if the large proportion or even majority of your students are local Tamils or they are local, of other South Asian origin, and they might have some perceptions or some foreknowledge about what the history of the Tamils or the history of the Tamil culture in Singapore entails, right? So when you bring up that more Tamil Nadu centric view of history, right? How does this change your perspective?
That's a great question.
Mm,
Thanks for that. So most of our students are local Singaporean Tamil
mm,
students. In fact, I don't think I have taught anyone who doesn't, belong to
uh,
that profile so far. So they come in with an understanding of what it means to be Singapore Tamil, but they are always very curious about the basis of this identity. Like, is this entirely just rooted in Singapore? Um, is there some kind of resonance, whether in terms of, culture or in terms of politics, in terms of history that we might discern with regards to developments in Tamil Nadu is a question
mm,
they come in with. And there is much to be said in this regard because some of the earliest leaders in Singapore who helmed the movement for Tamil in Singapore, for Tamil education, for the Tamil language to be recognized as an Indian language in Singapore, were deeply influenced by the movement for the language, for the state in Tamil Nadu. And so there are congruences and convergences, if we were to think about this
mm,
from a historical point of view, between what was happening in the Tamil regions of South India and Singapore, Malaya. So when they learn about these convergences, I think it's always pleasant surprise for students to know that um, there is more to it than what they are familiar with. So if I might expound on this a little bit
yeah.
more, a lot of them come from families where um, their parents watch Sun TV, which is satellite television that draws on programs from India, so Indian-based channels. And in fact, a lot of these shows actually form a sort of blueprint for the kind of
Mm, mm,
lingo that we employ locally as well, which has gone to making what Singapore Tamil is today. So they come from that point of view of understanding that, okay, so Singapore Tamil culture takes certain aspects of Indian Tamil culture as its inspiration, but also departs from it in certain ways. But adding to that understanding is that actually these ties go back a long way, whether we think in terms of migration settlement histories or in terms
mm.
of political mobilization, social reform movements in India that had an imprint on developments here.
Right. That's really interesting and something I want to dive into, right? So uh, we can come back to social reform a bit later because I think that's your research as well. Let's talk about migration, right? We have a very generic model of migration to Singapore, right? Whether it's uh, Indian or it's Chinese or even the Southeast Asians, the Malays. Um, in terms of like push factors and stuff like that.
Mhm.
From this more Tamil Nadu centric view of history, right? How do you explain the migration of Tamils or the arrival of Tamils to Singapore? Because I understand the earliest arrivals were actually convict labor, right? That the British brought with them.
Mhm.
So how do we get that understanding of Tamil migration from a new perspective?
There are several ways
Mm,
of
mm,
looking at this, whether we think in terms of the earliest pioneers, and here I'm looking at prison labor equally
mm,
as pioneers because
mm.
their labor is responsible for many of the monuments that subsequently came to
Yep.
shape our local landscape, although these have been by and large forgotten pioneers, right? But then again, we have other pioneers like Narayana Pillai, who is thought to have come to Singapore along with Stamford Raffles, who went on to establish the oldest Indian Hindu temple in Singapore, Sri Mariamman Temple, who are equally pioneers. So there are many entry points into the kind of rich history
Mm.
of Tamil settlement in Singapore. And if we were to look at it in terms of the wider sort of historical canvas this is part of, we see that ties between Singapore and the south of India, Tamil speaking regions of India, go back all the way to the Chola period, to when this region is known as the Coromandel Coast, right? Which is a corruption of the Tamil term for Chola Mandalam, Sora's sphere of influence. So vast is the sort of back and forth, the linkages that have tied Southeast Asia and Malaya, Singapore specifically, to the Tamil speaking regions of South India.
I like the idea you said that the prison labor are our pioneers, except that beyond that one line, right? They built our monuments. So looking at them kind of functionally, uh,
Mm.
do we know the social history of those convict labor? I mean, what's her name? Perilis?
Yes,
You know,
Anuma
from
Pereira.
what? Anua? Say again?
Anuma Pereira.
Anuma Pereira, right? She has written a book on the kind of prison conditions, right? I think
Mhm,
uh,
mhm.
inside the prison. But how much do we know about the social history, the life, and the culture of this convict labor? Has there been documentation of, you know, who they are, what was their thinking, you know, when they step off the boat, right, as prisoners and had to do all this manual labor, right? You know, like a people's history of the convict labor. Has there been such a thing?
Well, I think, yes, you're right to say that they
Mm,
have been viewed, their contributions have been viewed very much
mm,
through a very functionalist sort of
mm,
lens of looking at their contributions to society. And there are sort of glimpses here and there into their lives from her account, for instance. But in terms of their lives themselves, their aspirations, their thoughts, their
mm,
everyday experiences, we don't get much of that from the
mm.
historical record. So there's a lot more that remains to be said about their social history.
Yeah, they were not allowed to. They were never freed, right? I mean, didn't become settlers.
No, well,
No,
they
yeah.
were not. Yeah. So
So
they, yes.
yeah, so they finished their sentence and the work, and they went back to India.
For a lot of them, the line seems to have, in a sense, stopped there, and we don't really know
Mm,
what happened to them after that. The record stops at their contributions to the landscape of this country, this place, but doesn't venture beyond what happened to them
mm.
after their service to their immediate sort of superiors was done.
So who are the subsequent Tamil migrants whom we actually know about? You know, in terms of why they left Tamil Nadu and why they came to Singapore.
We know a lot more about the waves of labor migration
Mm,
that followed the second half of the 19th century through the 20th century, um, from work records, from the records that were kept by planters, from government records, for instance, and subsequently from the early 20th century onwards from Tamil newspapers, for instance, that were specifically concerned about uplifting the conditions of this laboring masses who came to toil and who required representation, which was sent, which was not forthcoming from the British. And that meant, therefore, that the community had to look into ways to press the authorities for more sources of support for these groups of people.
Why did from the second half of 19th century, why did those migrants come to, or why did they leave Tamil Nadu?
Again, there were push and pull factors
Mm,
responsible for this, if you were to use the
mm,
familiar sort of jargon. There were a series of famines in the Tamil
mm,
regions of South India, which proved increasingly difficult, um, to remain there and uh, to thrive in those conditions. So there were push factors. There was
mm,
growing hardship. The colonial administration pushed hard on these people as well. Of course, colonialism was responsible in large part for the kind of famines, for the extent to which the famines became, serious sources of hardship on these people. And then on top of that, we have the kind of labor recruitment that was taking place in Malaya, which proved favorable to their arrival as well. So indentured labor gave way increasingly to Kangany labor in the late 19th century, especially from 1870s onwards. And Kangany labor, Kangany comes from the Tamil word to mean to oversee,
mm,
Kanganipal.
mm,
Um, Kangani labor, particularly given the rubber boom of the late 19th, early 20th centuries,
mm.
favored a large resident labor population as opposed to an itinerant labor population. So this was when waves of migration, circular migration, was especially favored, was especially facilitated as a result of the colonial economy, as a result of the kind of labor recruitment that was taking place. So, what would typically happen was that the Kangani would visit uh, his home district in Tamil Nadu, the Tamil regions of South India, along with the planter or the planter's representative. And he will talk big, he will sell the idea of migration, on the grounds that what was awaiting these groups was a life of plenty in Malaya, Singapore. And so these migrants would be emboldened, would be made more comfortable about the idea of migration, given that their kinsman, given that their friend, their family member had already migrated and seemed to be doing well. And so this fueled migration between Tamil districts and Malaya.
When I was studying Singapore history, Malayan history, in secondary school, there's so much memorization, right? And Kangani was one of the words I memorized, and it was always an evil word, right? Because of all the abuses. And I think there are there are many similarities with the Chinese migration here. The Chinese call it the pig trade, right? One question that always bothers me is the Kangani, as you said, right? They were selling migration, the dreams, right, to their kinsmen.
Mm.
Why would they do that? I mean, wouldn't there be some sanction from the community for doing such things? How
Well,
could they get away with it?
I think again, this comes back to self interest. The
Yeah.
Kangani had much to gain from bringing in people to serve this trade. Um, and the flag that they would receive would be, flag that they would receive upon
Mm,
returning to Malaya. And at that point, the rhetoric would often be that, look, yes, things are not perfect here, but if you want to, if you work hard enough, you can make things work. So this was often the kind of discourse of, uh, you know, life is not great, but it is still better than what you are left back home, that accompanied migration.
Was there sanction? I mean, were they ever sanctioned by the community? I mean, it's like a village, right? Probably, where some of the kinsmen, unless those kinsmen are coming back and saying, my life has improved, I was actually able to save money, and, help the family buy land or something like that. If they came back and they complained and they cursed the Kangani, wouldn't there be sanction for the Kangani? How were they able to get away with it? I don't understand that.
I think there's a great deal of
Mm,
this is something that I've only ever traced from the Malayan side of things.
mm, mm.
And so on this side, there was a great deal of criticism leveled at the Kangani as an
Yeah,
exploitative agent
yeah.
within the scheme of things. But I think unless we were to go back and look at the Indian side of things, to
Mm,
look at whether any sort of anti-Kangani rhetoric, took off in a big way, and I cannot speak to this because I've never really looked at it from that
mm.
angle, then what we have is only the Malayan perspective, Malayan side of
Yeah,
things.
yeah. The British were very convinced it was abusive and exploitative. What was exploitative about it?
Mm.
Mm,
So often, Kangani form of labor recruitment would underplay the difficult conditions that lay in wait of these laborers upon arrival in Malaya. Um, i- they were often left to the discretion of the Kangani, who would, often, besides sort of really promoting conditions, exaggerating the kind of conditions that lay in wait for them in Malaya, would
mm,
also sort of under describe the hardship that the experience of working in Malaya entailed. And so often we have a situation where laborers came to a life of great toil. They were frequently underpaid and exploited by the planters. They worked very long hours. They were up before daybreak. They were
mm, mm,
they were overworked, given very meager sort of wages. Living conditions were poor, and this was the situation. And there was very little in terms of reprieve that they could look to under the terms of the system.
did the migrants have to borrow money from the Kangani to pay for the passage and expenses on the way to Singapore?
Yes, often they did. And here
Yeah.
I like to think that there is a similarity, even
Mm,
if we don't acknowledge it very much, between that system of labor recruitment and the manner in which our migrant domestic workers are brought in,
mm, mm,
particularly helpers, female helpers who work in our homes, who also incur a great deal of debt in order to come here to work, to fend for themselves, to save for their families.
mm. The Bangladeshis as well, right?
Yes, well, yes.
So what can you explain the difference between indentured labor and the Kangani system? Mm,
So indentured labor is a form of contract-based
mm,
recruitment, as opposed to Kangani, which required a middleman who would serve the purpose of the contract, in a sense. So although indenture was also exploitative,
mm,
at least there was a contract there,
mm,
that served to provide some minimal safeguards for these laborers who were coming in. Whereas with the Kangani system of labor recruitment, a lot of this was agreed verbally. A lot of the agreement was word of mouth, which
mm,
meant that there was no surety, no guarantee for these laborers when terms and conditions shifted, as they often did.
mm. In the Kangani system, was there a contract? There was no contract.
There was usually no contract, or at
Okay,
least the contract was a very sort of ad hoc one. It was
right.
flexible.
So when the immigrants arrive in Singapore, were they free to go? Were they free agents?
Technically, yes, but given
Yeah.
that they came indebted, most of them could not clear their debts, you know, and leave. But they were not free to leave when, if you were to look at the kind of debts that they had incurred in order to pay for their passage here.
And eventually the British caught on to this. And did they do anything?
Yes.
Hmm.
So there were a series of laws that were passed, and this was also because of uh, you know, changes in the colonial economy. It was because of the Great Depression that
Hmm.
necessitated, a major shift in how labor was thought of. For all these reasons, the Kangany system was eventually abolished. And we also have a situation wherein um, migration tapered off post 1930s because of the Great Depression, which meant that those who were already resident in Malaya already didn't have jobs or were struggling to hold on to their jobs. So in that context, migration had to be discouraged.
So how long would you say the Kangani system was in operation?
I would say, I think it is 1870s to about
Yeah, it's very long. Yeah, it's almost the entirety of the high colonial period, isn't it?
yeah, that's right.
Why did it take so long?
I think again, self-interest, colonial self-interest meant
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
they were not going to do anything to rock the boat unless there was a pressing reason to, a reason that fit into their own plans and their own agendas.
Mm. Yeah, one of the foundational principles, right, of British rule, right, British presence in Malaya and Singapore is, of course, the idea of protection. And in the case of the Indians, there was also protection, right, because this was supposedly British subjects. So the British protected them, but it's really a myth, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I
Mm,
think
mm,
a lot of this is, what I think in Tamil and Chinese as well, they call eyewash, right?
mm,
In a sense, measures put in place to make the establishment look good, but ultimately self-serving measures that protected their interests above everything else.
mm. And I think this is where very interesting because this is where the subject kind of overlaps with social reform, right? And community responses.
Mm-hmm.
There must have been some of the more educated, wealthier, more prominent Tamil leaders who would have seen this, right? Maybe they would have pressurized the British to do something about it. Does the Kangani system kind of encourage or nurture the creation, the emergence of Tamil community, right? That tried to reform the situation.
So the Kangani system of labor recruitment became one of the focal points of
Mm,
reformist measures,
mm,
particularly this notion that the vast majority of Tamils settled in Malaya and Singapore were illiterate, they were poor, they were lacking in basic literacy, and they didn't have much of a future to look forward to, and they were seen as coolie class.
yeah.
So, several scholars, Sunil Amrit and others, have talked about how this situation caused a great deal of consternation and anger for the middle class, leadership of the Tamil community, who felt that the colonial establishment and society in general was painting them with the same broad brushstroke. These are all
Mm,
coolies. Tamil identity is synonymous with the coolie identity. So I think the very first attempts at reform were again motivated by self interest, particularly this notion of we are not them, and we need to lift the community by its bootstraps if the situation is going to change. We need to remove the kind of stigma that attaches to the Tamil identity as coolie identity. And the only way to do that is to promote reform. And so there were several leaders who were
mm,
associated with reformist
mm,
initiatives. The most prominent of which in the Singapore context would be G. Sarangapani. And we could make the argument, and in a very valid and it would be a very valid and relevant argument to say that Malay and Tamil reform was initiated out of Singapore because many of the pioneering initiatives in the aspect of reform, in the direction of reform, were actually directed out of Singapore by leaders who were based in Singapore. So G. Sarangapani, for
Mm,
instance, launched the Tamil Murasu newspaper in 1935. The newspaper is still running and holds the distinction of being Singapore's only Tamil language newspaper to date. But even before the establishment of the Tamil Murasu newspaper, we have the Tamil's Reform Association, Tamilar Sirdirtha Sangam, which was co-founded by Annamalai Sidambaram Suppaya, R.C. Suppaya, and G. Sarangapani. So there were several initiatives like them, TRA, Tamil Murisu, all of which sought to speak
mm.
for the Malayan Tamil laborer and that were being coordinated out of Singapore in the 20th century.
Who were these reformist leaders? Were they the merchant class, the scholar class, or the official class?
They generally belong to the merchant classes.
Mm,
So the ones that I have talked about just now, they made their mark as businessmen. They were involved in various trades, but they also had an abiding interest in uplifting the community.
mm, mm. Was there a very, even in this, like maybe early 20th century, kind of awareness of the Tamil situation, right? Like compared to other groups of Indians that these reformers were thinking of, we have to do something to help the Tamils specifically.
Yes, and I
Mm,
think a large part of that again goes back to the stigma that attached specifically to the Tamil identity as
mm,
coolie identity,
mm,
because so many were coming to perform the kind of very necessary, social roles, roles that society needs to be able to function, even before it thinks of thriving, but that nobody wants to do, right? Hard sort of physical labor.
mm,
So these jobs were filled by migrants from the Tamil speaking regions of South India who were seen as docile. The reason why the British preferred these people in these roles was because of this notion that the Tamil laborer could be pushed around and made to do these jobs without
mm,
complaining too much,
mm,
without
mm,
agitating for better working conditions, higher wages. Um, but that itself led to this stereotyping that all you need to do is provide the Tamil laborer with some toddy and meager wages, and he will do what you ask him to do. So there was this marginalization, a systematic marginalization that actually became part and parcel of colonial policy that the Tamil leadership resented and sought to change. And the way to do this, as they saw, was to persuade these people, these migrants, these laborers who are coming in, of the importance of self respect,
mm,
the importance of lifelong learning. Now we have a term for it. Back in the day, they didn't have that term, lifelong learning, but that is what they were trying to push these people to do. So they would establish night schools, for instance. The
mm, mm,
Tamils Reform Association took the lead in establishing night schools so that laborers who had put in a hard day's worth of work would have the opportunity to avail themselves to learning by evening if they
mm,
so wished. They also took the initiative in establishing Tamil schools. The Tamil Education Society, again under the leadership of G. Sarangapani, um, came up in an initiative to provide the children of these laborers with opportunities to learn, primarily through Tamil medium, right?
mm,
Because these were Tamil language schools, but to give them a stab at education as the only means of social uplift. And many of these views were actually inspired by the Dravidian self-respect movement
Mm.
that was unfolding at the same time in parallel in
Oh.
Tamil Nadu Madras Presidency.